Hi, and welcome to The Grand Balance, a weekly podcast hosted by two working grandmas navigating the beautiful chaos of work and family. On today's episode, we will discuss the early days of being a new grandma and how we balanced our work responsibilities while being able to support our daughters with their newborns. Angela, what are some things you can remember that you did to help your daughter and son-in-law when your grandson was born?
Well, I can tell you that one of my first duties as new grandma was visitor monitor. So we have a big family, as I mentioned in the prior podcast. So there was concern that a lot of people were going to want to visit. And actually, post-COVID, there's a lot of rules and restrictions now on how many people can visit. So we had to be really strategic on the hours they could visit. Everybody's got to log in. So we could only had two people in a room at a time. So I stayed all day and made sure that everybody had it all coordinated and folks weren't showing up at once. But I did have my first grandma failure early on, day one.
What happened?
I was supposed to bring a baby blanket home so the dog could smell the baby from the swaddle blanket, and I forgot it. And I was almost home, and I texted my daughter, and I said, "Do you want me to come back?" And she was so exhausted. She's like, "No, please do not come back. My dog will figure it out." So
that's funny. Well, on the other hand, I did the same thing. I did bring the baby blanket home for the dogs to sniff. And the biggest worry was one of her dogs eating the blanket. So they didn't really pay 1 ounce of attention to the blanket. So I'm not sure. I think it's good in theory, but may not work in all cases.
Yeah. Oh, that brought terrible visions to my head. So.
Well, she just has one that chews a lot of any kind of fabric.
Yeah. What about you? First nights?
First nights, my daughter was actually in the hospital for right over about a week. So I was primarily concerned with just bringing them some food as they got tired of some of the hospital food. I know one thing that was very helpful for them was their in-laws, specifically the father-in-law, stayed and helped with the dogs overnight because they were very concerned about the dogs, obviously. So I did more of the hands-on back and forth to the hospital, going to their home and bringing things because they obviously hadn't expected on staying that long. So bringing things from their home that they needed, bringing some food, just kind of being on call to do whatever they needed to do while they were at the hospital.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, mine only stayed in for 2 days. So she came home pretty quickly. And I got to say, those first nights were overwhelming. I actually went back to try to remember, those first nights. I went back through all my texts and saw some of the texts that were going back and forth between us. And again, managing visitors, a lot of people wanted to come and visit, but she did a pretty good job. She had a plan. She says, "I want to get up every day. I want to get the baby ready, myself ready every day." So she spaced it out where every day she'd have one visitor for the next couple of weeks of being home. And it worked out nicely. But really the thing that she needed most was just that moral support because, as you know, they are exhausted. We didn't want to show up every day. We came the first day she was home, brought food, which was so important. But we were, worried about, giving them the opportunity to kind of learn on their own about what it takes to be a parent with lack of sleep and all of that.
And just scheduling, I think, is really something they need to set right away, is getting on a good schedule and trying to figure out what works for them.
Right. And, I thought my son-in-law is really into sleep. He studies it. He's read books on it.
Oh, wow.
And so there was a concern that he wasn't going to get his sleep and it was not going to be a good sight. But he actually did really great. He was surprised how much he could live off of sleep, and they kind of put a schedule together and were very supportive of each other. So it was nice to see that they didn't get too impacted by that.
Yeah, that's funny because my situation's the opposite. My son-in-law exists very well on little sleep, and my daughter's the one that needs the sleep. So I was concerned she wasn't going to get enough sleep. But as we all know, you can't really plan for the lack of sleep when a baby comes. Nobody's really well rested.
What are some of the other things that did your daughter share with you? What was really helpful in those early stages?
I did ask her after the fact, and she did mention a few things that were helpful that she hopes to come in subsequent deliveries, because she said it really did make a difference getting adjusted. She said her friends had set up a meal train, and that was really helpful for them because they knew that they had food every day. Her husband could eat well. Obviously, she was eating well and breastfeeding and needing the nutrition. DoorDash cards, she said, were really helpful. When they were in a pinch, they could just order out dinner, which is obviously something we never had the opportunity to do. So that's a whole new fun thing. When she was in the hospital, because she was in for a long time, all the food in their refrigerator went pretty bad. So I went one day and just completely emptied out the refrigerator, cleaned it out, and completely restocked it with the things that they normally use. So she said that was really helpful, coming home to a stocked refrigerator, not having to worry about grocery shopping for the first week.
Yeah, you did a big Costco run, didn't you?
I did. I filled the back on a weekend, which I would never normally go to Costco on a weekend because that's craziness. But
yeah,
that's a sacrifice that I made. So that she said that was something that really stood out in her mind that was really helpful. She said I did clean her house and washed her sheets and so forth. And so she said that was really nice to come home to, because she was able to come home to a clean home with fresh sheets. Of course, we mentioned the dogs. She was very grateful to her father-in-law for staying overnight with the dogs. I would go during the day while they were in the hospital and let the dogs out, but it was nice to have someone also there with them overnight. And another thing she mentioned was bringing food to the hospital, which we did cover.
Yeah. No, those are all great things. I texted her one day and said, hey, how are things going? I think this was like day 3. And again, we were trying not to be there every day. And she said, Mom, I'm surprised. The baby's already soiled all of its newborn clothes. She barely got any newborn clothes. So I ran to the store and bought some newborn PJs. Of course, they're just going to be in PJs the whole time for a while. But it's a tip for everybody that I think people assume that all the things they get at a shower are going to be newborn clothes, and they got hardly any.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because people do tend to buy some of the larger sizes, or thinking it's also hard to predict how big the baby's going to be. Both of our kids had fairly small babies, but then, I mean, you hear about the 9 and 10 pounders that come and they're out of newborn immediately. So I think
true.
That's a good tip if you just never know what size. My daughter ended up, a friend of hers gave her some preemie clothes, which came in super clutch in the beginning, because when she was a little tiny thing, she could wear those. And then, as you said, the newborn do last for quite some time. And if you don't have enough of those, it's a good tip. Buy some newborn clothes.
Yeah. So other than that, they seem to be doing really great their first couple of days, with the exception of something that lasted quite a bit of time, and that was the breastfeeding issues. The baby, as most babies do, lost weight in the first couple of days, but would not eat. My daughter went to the lactation specialist, and 2 weeks in, still not gaining weight. They were getting very concerned. And unfortunately, the lactation specialist, I don't know if it was my daughter's sensitivity and worry, or if the lactation specialist didn't show enough empathy to the situation. But she had said, oh, the baby's spending more energy trying to get something out of you than he's getting out of you. And that comment just really frustrated my daughter and made her feel like she's not a good mother.
Well, she's probably so stressed out with the baby losing weight and trying to, I think the whole situation with breastfeeding, especially initially, is so stressful. And I do think lactation specialists, like any other career, there's some excellent ones and there's some ones that are doing their job. And I think the ones that are excellent definitely shine above. And hopefully she was able to get better advice from a subsequent one.
Yeah, I hear about how they have, how they have doulas for preparing for the pregnancy, but they also have something similar for when the baby comes home. Unfortunately, they're also very expensive. So we did not go down that route. But it would be great if they had more options for women, for some in-home care services or something to, make it part of the care delivery package,
No, that's so true. I think it also probably depends on the insurance, because I know with my daughter, the reason she had to stay in the hospital so long was because the baby wasn't gaining weight quickly enough. And so once she was finally released, they were going to the hospital every day or every other day, seeing a lactation specialist. And that was a great resource for them because it took some of the stress off just knowing day to day if she was gaining weight or not.
I think that first negative experience just really did not give her the confidence that those lactation specialists would be any different. But she did, after a while, she did go back and got one that was really great and really, was more hands-on, which helped her a lot.
Oh, good.
But unfortunately, the baby ended up having acid reflux. And so they had to do tests and ended up that she had to give up soy. She had to give up dairy. So it took a couple of weeks for her to change her diet. And then finally, as things got out of her system, the baby was able to begin taking in without, throwing it all up and things like that. So it all ended up working good. And now he's a little chunkster. He eats all the time.
So they were able to isolate it was a dietary problem with him?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
That was nice.
Yeah. But boy, was it hard in the beginning because she just lacked confidence in being a mom.
Well, as any new mom would.
Right. But in our day, you didn't have all of the stuff on the internet that says, try this, do that. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. It's just you trusted the doctor. You trusted your mom or your grandmother or whoever else was around in your female circle to give you guidance on how to get through it.
Yes, very true. There's just sometimes the information out there is a good thing and sometimes it's just too much. My daughter actually similarly had breastfeeding issues and she was just having problems with the baby gaining weight. She was eating really well, but she just wasn't getting enough milk in her and we couldn't really figure out why. And it turns out it's such a common thing now to have a tongue tie. And so they were evaluating her and finally decided to go ahead and go through with the surgery, which I'm surprised now you hear about it happening. I don't remember ever hearing about it back in our day. So I don't know if it's a new thing or whether they're just diagnosing it more. I would be curious to hear from some of those medical professionals out there on what the change has been with that. But they did bring her in for surgery and poor little thing, she got home and it was painful for her to eat. And I came over and the baby was crying and my daughter was crying. And I thought, ay, ay, ay.
That must have been really hard for your daughter to make that decision because I started reading on that. Again, everything's on the internet. And there's so many horror stories about it that it makes you think, well, no, I don't want to put my baby through that, even though there's plenty of other success stories that say this is a legitimate issue. You should be doing it. So how did she kind of navigate the pros and cons of all of that and that difficult decision?
She and her husband both did a lot of research on it, and she was fortunate that her best friend had gone through the same surgery with her baby and had had similar issues with her first child and didn't have the surgery and wished that maybe she had known about it with the first because she said it was such a relief with the second one. So I think that encouraged my daughter. She heard real life experience with a successful tongue tie surgery. So I think that helped them out and reduced some of the worry that they had. But it was definitely stressful. She had a very, very chill baby, and just to hear her cry, it was pretty heartbreaking for them. And knowing that she had a little bit of pain when she was eating the first couple of days. Also with tongue tie surgeries, I didn't realize you have to do these exercises in their mouth, which is painful for the baby initially. And I know that was really difficult for her. And she had her husband do the exercises because she just couldn't take it at first to hear the baby cry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be hard. Because then you wonder, I'm sure, just like any parent, did I do the right thing?
Right. You start second guessing yourself. And,
exactly.
But
yeah.
Similarly to your grandson, everything has worked out well, and they've kind of gotten into a groove with the feeding, and she is gaining. She's still a little peanut, but she's gaining consistently. So
yeah,
we're happy about that.
Good. And it's funny in our generation, if babies were crying, babies weren't eating, they were having acid reflux, all of that, it was colic. Everything was colic.
That's so true.
Right? Now we know, like, colic can mean this. It can mean acid reflux. It can mean that they're allergic to something. It could, so it's great that science has advanced. So there is more information. It's just, I think when folks are looking and doing their research, they need to go to those more scientific journals and things like that. Maybe not the group forums, the kind of more community groups that just put stuff out there that might have misinformation. I'd say those community forums are great to give some experiences, but I would always back it up with more of those scientific journals or better research.
I agree. The other advantage I think our kids have is they've grown up with the internet, and they also know how to disseminate what's true and what's not true to some extent. So they do question things, where I feel like sometimes people in our generation read it on the internet and take it as the truth.
So I hope you're right about that, because it does scare me how many things are out there that they might be believing.
Yeah, no, I do feel like they definitely have been taught what's a verified source, et cetera, where we just never were taught those things because the internet was not a thing when we were going to school and growing up.
Yeah,
so hopefully true. That's the case. So I did ask a couple of her friends too what they thought were valuable things that I hadn't maybe thought of, that other people might find valuable to help with newborns. One of her friends had mentioned that her mom would come over, wash bottles, pick up grocery orders, did laundry, those are all things that are never ending with a baby, that are great suggestions of things to do. Another thing she mentioned that I hadn't thought of was she had said one of her friends came over and walked her dogs, and said that was a big source of stress for her because the dogs were somewhat neglected with the last part of the pregnancy, the newborn coming home. And I think that is a really good tip for people that have dogs that maybe need walks, need some one-on-one attention. She just said it took a lot of stress off of her, and that's something she would have even appreciated more of, because it's one less thing for her to worry about or be stressed out about.
I think for my daughter, that was their way to get out of the house. Now, your daughter had a couple of dogs, that mine just has one, but that was their way to get out of the house because they knew they had to walk the dog.
Right. My daughter did a really good job, too, of getting out with the stroller, the husband, and the two dogs. In this case, one of her closest friends had a child already. So at this point, it was a toddler, a baby, two dogs. So I think that's why she so valued someone just paying attention to the dogs, because they probably weren't getting the attention they were used to. And as she said, people that come over to help want to either help her or help with the baby or help with the toddler, and the dogs kind of get lost in the shuffle. So I thought that was an interesting tip and something normally we would not have thought about.
Yeah. Now, how was work-life balance for you during this time? My daughter, I remember I missed a few calls because I was taking a shower, and she said, "Why are you not picking up your calls? What's going on? Like, please call me back." And I'm thinking, well, one, I'm working. Two, I'm barely getting in a shower. So how is it for you?
For me, it went pretty smoothly. I am used to working remote a lot, so I can kind of carry things around, and I've always kind of had to make my schedule very flexible. So that worked out fine. I felt like I was able to get everything in that I needed to do.
Yeah. For me, when I was on client phone calls, I would just text her back. We were texting mostly, but sometimes she would call. I would text her back and said, "I'll call you right back." But if I had internal calls with my peers and colleagues, a lot of them knew I was a new grandmother. So I'd say, "Hold on, I just want to make sure nothing's wrong." And I'd pick up and see if it was urgent, and then I'd go back to the call. But I mean, I could see if you're a working grandma and you're working a shift where you don't have that flexibility, that's hard.
It would be way more difficult, because not only are you managing your regular work schedule, you're trying to be over there to assist, and you wouldn't be as flexible. So I can see that would be a big challenge.
Like, all your support is, okay, I can help you after 5 or after 6, but when we were moms, we didn't get much time off like they do now. So I think maybe, I don't know, are we too soft with the kids now, not giving them enough time to figure it out on their own?
Yeah, my mom was long distance, and I'm sure I called and asked her questions, but that would be an interesting thing for some of you listeners. Give us some ideas of how you were supportive long distance or from out of state with the newborn. Because I'm sure there are some great ideas out there of how you can assist and not physically be there.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't be there all the time when she needed me. I wanted to, and I have a flexible schedule. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yes, I would too, because
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people have very creative ways that are very helpful to their kids and their new grandchildren.
Yeah. And then I'm sure my colleagues were kind of also sick of me sharing like little photos, but it was really cool. They kept, every time I'd get on a call after they knew I had the new grandbaby, they'd say, "Oh, any pictures?" and things like that. So that was
Aw.
great. So I got to brag about the baby on calls for the first couple weeks. Then it's like done. Like, you're done. Stop. Get back to
No
work.
more spam.
Yeah.
That's what I would just spam everyone with the cute pictures.
Get back to work. Yeah.
Didn't really give them an option.
Speaking of work, so this was probably within at least the first few weeks or maybe the first month. My daughter and son-in-law were already starting to think about what happens when they have to go back to work.
The first
And-
month of pregnancy, after they announced their pregnancy or after the baby was born?
After the baby was born.
Okay.
Yeah. Because as you know, I mean, daycare right now, you have to get on the waiting list a year, 2 years in advance. So they were already trying to figure out how they were going to balance, support for the baby. They had started looking at daycare centers and were pretty discouraged what they were finding. The ones that they wanted had multi-year wait list and things like that. So I remember this vividly. I'm on a walk with my dogs and talking to my daughter, and it was a weird question. She said, "How much involvement do you want with the grandbaby?" And I paused for a minute and I was thinking, "What do you mean? I want a lot of involvement." And she says, "Well, no, I get that, but do you want to help out? Do you want to just visit once in a while? Like, what do you..." And I think she was having a hard time asking me the question, "Will you help with the baby?" Because she knew I had had a career for, all of her life. She knew I loved my career. She knew I was passionate about the type of work I do. And so they needed help, but I think they were hesitant to say, "How can you help, Mom?"
Is this something you had thought about yourself prior to this?
I had, and I think I hinted about it with them before, that I'll want to be more involved with the baby. I want to help, take care of the baby. I was very fortunate that my mom and my husband's mom were both retired when I had my kids.
Oh, that was super lucky.
Yeah, and they live 15 minutes in both directions. So while I didn't want to, count on them 100%, they were involved in their lives a lot growing up, and they helped watch the baby. We were even more fortunate that I worked days and my husband worked nights. And those first months that my daughter needed daycare, my husband was the daycare. So we never got to see each other. I think Monday night was our night together as a family, but the baby got a lot of attention. And so my in-laws and my mom really were there to help out so that we didn't have to send them to daycare when they were really young. And they were stressed about that.
Now,
So
you can imagine, besides getting off of a wait list and looking at the facilities, the expense is also astronomical now.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I can't even imagine. It was hard when I was, 25, 30 years ago. But now it's probably
Right.
triple the price.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
I have no idea.
I remember it being very expensive. I was fortunate that I didn't have to use childcare with my kids, but I remember just the costs were mind-boggling, and now so much more so.
Yeah. So she asked me, "What's the involvement?" And I, said, "I really want to be involved. I want to help you. But I know myself, and I know that just like I knew that I couldn't be a stay-at-home mom, nothing against stay-at-home moms. They are amazing. They are much needed for sure, because they held the schools together, the PTAs together, and all of that. But I knew that I needed that professional side of me to balance, that personal side and the family side. So I said, I want to help, and I need to think about it. But I So I thought about it and I put together a plan of how I could help them. But it was so interesting how I think she was just afraid to outright ask, like, can we count on your support?
But that was really respectful the way she did it too, because I do know of other families where that has been a source of controversy and some problems within the family because the expectation is different on one side or the other, where the daughter or son has the expectation that the parents will be involved in the daycare, or vice versa. The parents have an expectation that they're going to be able to have the child X amount of days, and it doesn't align with whatever the parents had in mind. So I think it's interesting you guys were able to come to an agreement, and it's awesome because, like I said, I do know a lot of families have problems with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a pretty great arrangement. Again, I think it's because I work for an amazing company that offers some level of flexibility. So I can work 2 days a week. I can be flexible with my hours to work around my daughter's hours. She works an East Coast schedule, so she's off by 2:00 anyway. And I can work as long as the work's getting done and I'm meeting my deliverables and expectations and the commitments that the company expects from me. On those 2 days, I'm able to get it all done. And when I have an important meeting that I need to attend, I plan it ahead. And so one will come home early. Her husband works in the office a couple days a week. My daughter works from home. So we are calendaring, do you have a meeting at this time? No, but I have a meeting. And so we figure it out and we tag team, and it's a great opportunity to participate in raising my grandson.
No, I think your setup is amazing. And it's really nice too that I know just from what you've told me, you've gotten your husband involved too. So you kind of trade off where you watch your grandson. So everyone has time to be able to be around the grandson and get to know him.
Yes. So I go to my daughter's house and we share responsibilities on Tuesday. And then they come to our house on Thursday, which I thought was very kind of them as well, so that I'm not in traffic 2 days a week. But we've made it family day.
Yeah, I love that whole thing.
Yeah. So my husband will cook dinner at night for the whole family.
And you're all together, which is super cool.
We're all together. My son works from home as well. So we have the full house on Thursdays. We're all
with
working.
The dogs.
We're all balancing working with the baby. And, but I do try to get him out a couple of hours during the day. And we have our little mini excursions every Thursday. And it's really fun.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a different situation because my daughter's an educator, and it just happened timing-wise that after she had the baby, her leave took her through the end of the school year. So we haven't had to come up with a schedule yet as far as what's going to happen in the future. But what we've done is I've just told her I'm going to leave Fridays as available as possible so you can make your appointments, you can get some time to yourself. You can take a shower, which is what she usually wants to do with any free time, in peace and not worry. So that's kind of the setup we've done. And it's worked out really well, too, because I've had one-on-one time with the baby. We've been able to do some fun little girls' lunches and activities like that.
Yeah, so she's not back to work yet then because it's summer.
Yes, she was very, very lucky. When she had initially planned on having a baby, she had talked about being off for the summer, and I told her, things don't always work out exactly how you think they're going to plan on a schedule. And sure enough, it did work out for her. So I'm happy they were that lucky.
Yeah, that's great. And it's nice that you're giving her some me time or her time, because we haven't figured that one out yet. Because I'm still working on those days, but modifying my schedule. And my daughter has her East Coast schedule at 2:00. I'm gone. And so she still she's got her work time and her baby time. I don't know when she gets her time. I think she's just starting to figure that out.
Yeah, hopefully she can figure it out because that's important too. Self-care is extremely important for a new mama.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about self-care for grandmas too on another episode.
Yes, I have some good info on that too. I just saw and I was so interested in it. But so we have that more to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reflecting on, so we were first moms, now we're grandmas, but we still are parents. We're still moms, right? We're still supporting. Now we've got focus on the grandkids. But then there's new focus too on the elders. I know unfortunately, your mother has already passed. My mother-in-law is needing additional care. So as we get older, we're taking on more and more responsibilities. It's not like we lose responsibility and we get to spend more time on ourselves. We just take on more.
It's a bigger circle for sure.
Yeah, we just take on more and have to balance more. And that's why we call it the grand balance.
Exactly. And there's plenty of things we can do with all the latest research to hopefully keep ourselves healthier and more active for longer periods of time.
Yep, absolutely. So on our next episode, we'll talk about maintaining our own lives. We are taking on all these responsibilities. We still are working, but we need to focus on our health. We need to focus on our friendships and things that, are a little bit for us so that we can stay happy and healthy and be that strong grandma that our grandchildren need.
Yeah, I agree. I think for us to be effective grandparents and parents, we do need to address all facets of our lives. So that will be interesting to see some ideas that people can hopefully let us know things they've done, and we can contribute to some ideas of how to do that.
All right. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the podcast so we can continue to grow our community. And follow us on Instagram at Working Grandmas Podcast, on Facebook at The Grand Balance, a Working Grandmas Podcast, and join our LinkedIn group, Working Grandmas. You can also email us at info@workinggrandmas.com or message us through any of our social media platforms.